Sally Osberg has led entrepreneurial organizations and been an agent for social change throughout her career. As president and CEO of Skoll Foundation, she partners with founder and chairman Jeff Skoll and heads the organization's teams in identifying and supporting innovators pioneering scalable solutions to global challenges. She is a well-known proponent of thought leadership, research, alliances that advance the work of social entrepreneurs solving the world's most pressing problems. Currently, Sally serves on the boards of the Skoll Foundation, Skoll Global Threats Fund, Oracle Education Foundation, and the Palestine-based Partners for Sustainable Development. She was founding executive director of Children's Discovery Museum of San Jose, guiding the institution to international recognition for its cutting-edge work in the museum field, and formerly active as the director of the boards of the American Association of Museums, the American Leadership Forum, and Women and Philanthropy, among others. She has received the John Gardner Leadership Award from the American Leadership Forum, being inducted into the Junior Achievement Business Hall of Fame, and being named by the San Jose Mercury News as one of the Millennium 100 for her role in shaping and leading Silicon Valley. As a side note, Skoll Foundation and Sally's work with Skoll Foundation were the sparks in founding Sensa, so we are here as a result of their amazing work. With that note, I want to introduce Sally. Thank you.
Thank you, Barish. Let's see, I think I'm supposed to turn this up there. Can you hear me? Can you hear me okay? Yeah, okay, good. It's wonderful to see you. I know this is getting close to finals, or it is finals, and so I figure the people who are here are really, really keen on social entrepreneurship. So congratulations for being here, and I'm not going to disappoint you. But I will talk for the first half an hour or so, and then we'll engage in some conversation, and that's where I hope you'll ask me some really interesting, thoughtful, provoking, great questions. I think Barish wanted me to lead off this series, but I end up closing it out. So I have some idea about what some of the speakers you've heard from have said. I'm going to agree with a lot of what they've said, and I'm going to disagree with some of them. So you'll make up your own minds about what you think social entrepreneurship is, what you think its potential is, and whether you think it really has something important and new to offer the world. I happen to think it does, but I'm a true believer. So I was asked for this talk to talk a little bit about my own journey first, so I'll spend a little time on that, and then I'll talk about, ooh, God, that's, God just showed up or something. Anyway, then I'll talk about the work of the foundation, our strategy, our evolution, and some of the social entrepreneurs with whom we work. But I'd like to frame my talk as really partners in possibility. That's how we think of the social entrepreneurs with whom we work, that there are partners in creating the world we all know is possible, is within reach, and their vision and their hard work gives us a real glimpse of what the world could be like. At about the age of 10, I gave up fairy tales and started reading biographies. The ones I liked best were the ones about really fearless, courageous women like Florence Nightingale and Jane Addams and Eleanor Roosevelt. They had it all over Cinderella or Rapunzel as far as I was concerned. They didn't just think about what the world could be like. They went ahead and did some remarkable, remarkable things. They were courageous, they were smart, and they had a bias for action. Moreover, they were often really challenging the norms of the day. They were all women. I read biographies about some pretty amazing men too, but these women really were out to change the world, and change the world they did. Jane Addams brought the settlement movement, really founded social work in the US, bringing Hull House to the slums of Chicago. She really imported the settlement house movement from the UK, where it originated. She brought this to the US in the late 19th century. And every progressive movement you can think of, suffrage, civil rights, women's rights, every progressive movement, children's rights even, has Jane Addams' fingerprints all over it. A remarkable, remarkable social entrepreneur. And I love this quote of hers, that nothing could be worse than the fear that one had given up too soon and left one unexpended effort that might have saved the world. So saving the world has not just come about as a newfangled idea. This was very much in evidence at the turn of the century with Jane Addams. And she looks kind of dour in that portrait. But in fact, she had a great sense of play and fun. Hull House had playgrounds and was really a place designed to bring families together in a very socially unusual way for the time. Florence Nightingale. You probably think of Florence Nightingale as the lady with the lamp. She was the founder of what became the modern profession of nursing. But what you probably don't know is that she was a fiend for statistics. So those of you who are studying statistics, I think would find very interesting her emphasis on the data and the evidence. So when she came back from the Crimea after nursing the injured, the sick, the soldiers who were stricken from the battle, the Crimean War, she dug into the data and she realized that more deaths occurred because of diseases like cholera and typhus and dysentery than from battle scars or gunshot wounds. And that's when she became really convinced that hygiene and sanitation were the key to saving lives. And that was really her breakthrough. We owe everything we know about sanitation to the pioneering work of Florence Nightingale, a great, great, great social entrepreneur. Eleanor Roosevelt, she didn't just sit by the fireside listening to her husband's chats. She was a formidable thinker and a formidable activist herself. She was one of the founders of the UN. She was on the committee that drafted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and she co-founded Freedom House, which is a great entrepreneurial organization that still exists. In fact, Freedom House does the annual survey of, you're all nodding, you probably know about Freedom House, does the annual survey of democracy globally. So a great social entrepreneur whom you may not think of as a social entrepreneur, but as I say, she was creating these institutions that continue to thrive and make a difference today. And I love this quote. You could say that about men too, I think. Like tea bags, you never know how strong they are until they're put into hot water. So I don't have to, though, today go back 50 or 100 years to interact with and get to know some wonderful social entrepreneurs. We have a super portfolio of social entrepreneurs at the Skoll Foundation, more than 100 women and men, approaching 90 organizations. And this is just a sort of rogues gallery of who they are. And they're from every country in the world. You probably recognize a few of them there. I think, have you had Kiva in here? Have you had Matt and previous years, Matt and Premel, and you're going on this field trip to see them, right? But anyway, they're up there, right in that last row. And Jim Fruchterman is here in the Valley too, a great social entrepreneur at Benetech. So these are really a spectacular group of individuals whom we've gotten to know over the years and have the privilege of really helping support and help them scale up their impact. Not scale up their organizations, scale up their impact. And that will be a distinction that I'll make throughout my talk, that's what we think is important at the Skoll Foundation, the scale of impact. The scale of the organization is really insignificant when you're out to make a difference. Jeff Skoll, Stanford MBA. I too have some wonderful Stanford connections in addition to my boss being a Stanford GSB graduate. My daughter did her PhD here in the School of Education, and she gives me a lot of grief, actually, about social entrepreneurs working in education because she's a huge champion and very biased towards strengthening public education, and she worries, and probably some of you have heard this argument, she worries that social entrepreneurs working outside the system are undermining it rather than stimulating it. So we have many fierce arguments about this, as you can imagine. But Stanford, great institution, a crucible of many, many social entrepreneurs. And Jeff Skoll's whole portfolio of organizations really comes about in part because of his formative experience at the GSP. We are 4 organizations with various subsidiary organizations in the Skoll portfolio, all of us firing on the same cylinders of trying to drive social change and make a difference in the problems that really are the most significant problems in the world. The foundation works with social entrepreneurs. The Skoll Global Threats Fund, which is our sister organization, tends to safeguard humanity from existential threats like nuclear proliferation. Participant Media is Jeff's LA-based media company working to bring socially responsible media to the world, media that inspires and galvanizes to action. You're all millennials. Have any of you tuned in to Pivot TV? Do you know about Pivot TV? No? No one knows about Pivot yet? Well, they launched Pivot Television as a station dedicated toward millennials just this August. So that's a whole new channel to engage and entertain and galvanize the positive social actions of millennials. And then Capricorn Investment Group manages Jeff's assets and the foundation assets with the principle of trying to align the financial assets to drive positive social change. So everything in Jeff's portfolio is really addressing the imperative of trying to bring about positive change. Storytelling. I started by talking about my own path of being influenced by these biographies, which are really powerful stories of people who made a difference in the world. Jeff, too, like me, dodged irritating siblings by reading a lot. And as a young man, he read way above his years. He was reading Aldous Huxley and George Orwell and Ayn Rand as a young man. And from those writers, he derived a worldview. And his sense was that the world might not be as pleasant a place in years to come, that in fact humanity was facing all kinds of challenges. You know, Orwell's Animal Farm in 1984, and you know those classics, and the picture they painted of the world was really disturbing to him as a young man. And he realized at that time the power of stories to really affect who we are and what we think of the world. And so he decided as a young man that he would become a writer. Well, fast forward. Like many, many people, he set aside that dream to go down a more practical path. He was a double E at the University of Toronto, but he had the entrepreneurial bug. So when he graduated, he created a couple of companies, including a computer rental company called Computers on the Move. And he likes to joke that became prophetic because people who rented the computers kept on moving them, and they didn't come back, and they didn't pay for the rentals. So with that, he decided he needed to learn a few things about business, and he enrolled at the GSB and got his MBA. So in 1995, he graduated, and he graduated. How many of any of you working on your MBA? Any of you? Yeah, a few of you. Okay. So he graduated with all the acumen he needed to be able to spot a really good business opportunity. And that's why when Pierre Omidyar came to him with the idea for an online auction business, he realized that was a really stupid idea, and he didn't want anything to do with it. He was working at Knight Ridder at the time. And it didn't take him long, though, to realize that he was banging his head against the wall with Knight Ridder, that classified advertising was dying, and the company wasn't seeing the light about going to online advertising. And so he left in frustration and said to Pierre, okay, I'm in. and with that, he was employee number one and the first president of eBay, where he put his MBA to very good use, created the business plan that the company really still uses, and found himself 3 years later with wealth beyond his wildest imagination when eBay went public in 1998. 1999, he gets started with his own foundation, and he'd actually cut his teeth on a foundation by starting eBay's foundation when he was still working there as president. And he did it in a very innovative way. He was the first person, and eBay was the first company to dedicate pre-IPO stock for charitable purpose. And so it invested this pre-IPO stock at the Community Foundation of Silicon Valley, and lo and behold, when the company went public, that blossomed into many, many, many millions of dollars and formed a corpus. But as Jeff was working at eBay, he says, running across a very special kind of nonprofit leader, someone who to him looked and acted a whole lot more like an entrepreneur than like someone who was engaged in charitable purpose activity. And that really stuck in his mind and shaped his initial thoughts about the Skoll Foundation. This was his vision then, and it continues to be the guiding vision for the foundation and for all Jeff's enterprises today. When I joined in 2001, the foundation was in its early years. I was employee number one at the foundation, and one of the first things I did, and this is another Stanford connection, is take Jeff to meet one of my mentors, John Gardner. Do most of you know who John Gardner was? Do you know? Okay. Well, he was a great social entrepreneur and a great civic leader. He served five different presidents. He was the architect of Lyndon Johnson's Great Society, passionate about civil rights. He was the founder of Independent Sector, which brings together the largest NGOs in the country together with the largest foundations. He also founded Common Cause, which was the first organization to actually highlight the corrosive influence of corporate giving, corporate influence of a political agenda. So a remarkable human being. He was also president of the Carnegie Corporation of America, and Carnegie is one of the great foundations in this country. And as you probably all know, Andrew Carnegie really founded the public library system, not just in this country, but globally, as an institution that really could bridge the gap for folks in building the emerging democracy in the U.S. So bridging the gap between people who had access to knowledge and those who didn't have access to knowledge with this public library as an institution. But in John's era, he funded public television. So he was really doing the sort of equivalent of the public library system in the media world. A great innovator. So we asked John what it is that he thought a young foundation could do to make a difference in the world. And John said in his very sage and provocative way, bet on good people doing good things. And that really became and still is a mantra for us at the foundation and helps us think about social entrepreneurs as those good people doing good things on steroids. So that was the sort of first glimmer of how we would differentiate ourselves by focusing on social entrepreneurs. So what are these people we think of as social entrepreneurs? Well, as Muhammad Yunus likes to say, you know them when you see them. Victoria Hale, I think one of the great social entrepreneurs, a serial entrepreneur now. She's founded her second venture. Victoria is a pharmaceutical scientist, had worked with Genentech and a number of other companies. And what drove her crazy was seeing on the shelves of big pharma medicines, therapies, drugs that could address infectious disease and the burden of infectious disease in the developing world, but that they stayed on the shelves of big pharma as IP because the markets that needed them couldn't afford them. So with that, Victoria created the first nonprofit pharmaceutical company, the Institute for One World Health, to really bridge that gap between big pharma and the markets who needed these drugs and therapies. So what are social entrepreneurs? Well, the really simple answer, I think, and one that I believe everybody is capable of remembering, is that they're social entrepreneurs are entrepreneurs for social benefit. They are every bit as disciplined, as innovative, and as disruptive as the most iconic entrepreneur you can think of, whether it's Steve Jobs or Jeff Bezos or Martha Stewart. They are every bit the entrepreneur, but their goal is cracking the code on social problems. And that doesn't mean that they might not have a revenue-generating idea. It doesn't really matter if they're working in a for-profit, or they working as a market-based venture. They are trying to crack the code on a social or environmental problem, but they are entrepreneurs first and foremost. And one of these days, people will think of social entrepreneurs as the iconic entrepreneurs, and entrepreneurs will be a subset of social entrepreneurs. You know who this dynamic couple is? Yes, you do. Who are they? Well, that's it. Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers. So a lot of young people don't know who these characters are. They were actually, even in my day, they were a lot older. But I like to say that social entrepreneurs are to entrepreneurs the way Ginger Rogers is to Fred Astaire. She has to do everything Fred Astaire does, but backwards and in high heels. It is a whole lot harder. It is a whole lot harder to be a social entrepreneur than it is to be an entrepreneur. But you have to do everything. You have to design the venture, you have to raise the capital, you have to develop the products, you have to get them to market, people have to take up your innovation, it has to scale, and you have to find ways of supporting the venture outside sometimes what the market will bear and will tell you. So everything the entrepreneur has to do, the social entrepreneur has to do, but backwards and in high heels. So that's the way I like to think of how challenging it is. First mission of the Skoll Foundation was to seek out and invest in those whose ideas will generate lasting positive change to communities in the world. Didn't even mention the word social entrepreneur. Jeff and I had never heard of the concept of social entrepreneurship in 2001. Second iteration, advance systemic change by investing in, connecting, and celebrating social entrepreneurs. 2.0. Version 3.0, about 5 years old now. Drive large-scale change, investing in, connecting, and celebrating. That's our strategy, social entrepreneurs. But the differences are that we now work into the mission and the innovators who help them solve the world's most pressing problems. Pressing problems, that was the other addition. Not just any social entrepreneur doing any great thing in the world, but those who are really making a difference at scale on problems that are absolutely critical to humanity and the planet. So organizations evolve, and the Skoll Foundation has been no different. We've evolved as well. Our thinking has evolved, our learning has evolved, our experience has shaped who we are and what we care about and how we do our work. So very critical elements. This is essentially our strategy, and these are words we live by. This isn't just a statement on a wall. This is what we do and what we hold ourselves accountable for. At the end of the day, we want to see the markers of large-scale change in the work we do, the work the social entrepreneurs do. Very, very, very high bar. We're not trying to be all things to all people. We are trying to invest, connect, and celebrate in ways that actually power up social entrepreneurs out to change the world. So invest comes first. And what does that mean? Invest, well, I'm going to explain to you, but this is a shot of the Skoll World Forum. You can see that iconic social entrepreneur. You recognize him in the middle, Muhammad Yunus. You may not recognize the young woman to the right of him. That's his daughter, Monica Yunus, who is an opera singer and a great social entrepreneur herself. She's created this remarkable arts program in New York called Sing for Hope. And Mitch Besser there on the left, who's the founder of Mothers to Mothers. So this is our approach, this is our strategy, this is how we go about investing. We look at the issue, is this one of the world's most pressing problems? We look at the innovation, can we articulate the innovation? What is it that the social entrepreneur is trying to do, and how is it distinctive from the general approaches to this challenge? Is there inflection point? Is this really poised for greater impact? Is there proof of impact along the way that this model works? We're not an early stage investor. We are an inflection point, a mezzanine investor. So organizations we support have anywhere from 5 to 20 years under their belts, and they've maybe proven their model in a single country like India and are now taking it global, or they've honed their strategy in some way so that they are really poised to scale it globally in a very significant way. Issue, innovation, inflection point, and impact potential. We call it the 4 I's. And of course, the first criterion is the social entrepreneur, or the team of social entrepreneurs behind the venture. Their integrity, their intelligence, their perseverance, their humility, all of that weighs heavily in our evaluation. We want to know that we can trust these people and that we can be their partners, and they will be our partners for life. These are the issue areas we work with. We've developed these bottoms up, and you can see in the sub-issues, these are all arenas that the social entrepreneurs are working in. So an area like environmental sustainability has many subsets to it. Education, many ways to approach it, economic opportunity, health, peace and human rights, and sustainable markets, all focus areas for the foundation. Connecting and celebrating, our signature program, in addition to our Skoll Awards for Social Entrepreneurship program, is the Skoll World Forum. And these are just some shots from last year's forum. We partner with the Said Business School at Oxford University, where we've created the Skoll Center for Social Entrepreneurship. The Skoll World Forum is our really externally facing event. This is where we bring together change makers from all the sectors, from academe, from media, from philanthropy, from social finance, all the sectors, with the social entrepreneurs as the stars. So other gatherings put social entrepreneurs sort of on the margin and the powerful in the center. We do it the opposite. We say social entrepreneurs are the power here, and everybody else gets to learn from, participate with, scout for new folks they didn't know about. But the social entrepreneurs are the stars of the show. Kofi Annan there spoke last year. We had this wonderful group of Rwandan Hutu and Tutsi drummers. It was just a remarkable event. Last year was our 10th anniversary. So 10 years of accelerating impact. It's been called the Davos of social entrepreneurship. Nearly 1,000 delegates. We're not trying to grow it. There are 3 elements here that are important for us. The people who are part of it. It's not trying to be a big conference, a cast of thousands. It has a purpose. It's a forum. It brings together people so that they can learn from and interact with and engage with one another in a really thoughtful and rigorous way. But it's highly diverse, international, and we last year launched Skoll World Forum online in order to disseminate the content emerging from the forum to a much broader audience than can actually attend in person. Connect and celebrate, the third leg of the stool is celebrating. And something I've learned that you probably already know is that you can write stories and you can produce movies and you can develop scripts until you're blue in the face. But unless you have a channel for distribution, nobody's going to see them. And if nobody sees it, nobody reads it, nothing is going to change. So we've worked hard not only to create the partnerships to generate the content, such as our partnership with the Sundance Institute, but with different partners to be able to create channels for distribution. So more than 80 media stories, dozens of documentaries and content pieces that have been broadcast through those series. PBS NewsHour routinely does great stories on social entrepreneurs. BBC, PRI, NPR, all of them channels for dissemination. Know who this organization is? Anyone know this one? It's a great, great, great organization. There's actually a study going on right now. Stanford-led, Hao Li is leading the study at SEED. Is he at SEED? Anyway, it's on this organization called Writers for Health. And their story is pretty fascinating and really, really original. Barry and Andrea Coleman, two motorcycle enthusiasts. Barry's a very successful journalist, wrote for the FT, and Andrea was a biker, a great racer. And they became involved raising money for Save the Children through their motorcycle connections. And in 1986, they decided they really needed to go and see what was going on the ground in Somalia. And on his way to see one of the sites where Save the Children was active, Barry's car broke down. And he realized that there were rusted hulks of cars and trucks and everything else with wheels, you can imagine, everywhere. And that there was no system for maintenance apparent anywhere. And so with that, he and Andrea started developing this idea for what he called transportation resource management. And they worked with Save the Children for 10 years, between 1986 and 1996, to really build out the model. But by 1996, they realized that it was never going to go where it needed to go through Save the Children, which is a big NGO with a whole host of diverse programs. So they took a big gulp and they went home to their house in England, and they mortgaged their house to get the initial cash to found Writers for Health. And they came into the Skoll portfolio in 2005, and they have gone from strength to strength. They are now in 7 sub-Saharan African countries. They increase the efficiency and the efficacy of healthcare workers by more than 300%. The outcomes, the health outcomes where Writers is active, are demonstrably better than those in communities not served by Writers. And their model is very simple. It's make sure that the equipment is maintained, that the parts and the inventories are stocked, that people know how to change lug nuts and oil filters, and their standard is 100% uprate, not 75%, not 80%. These are healthcare workers. You can't get to people when they need it. If you can't get the samples back from the clinics, if you can't do the job, people die. So 100% uprate, and they do it. This is a really great example of how they've adapted the equipment. No ambulances, of course, rough terrain, and you can see how they've adapted a motorcycle to be able to function as an ambulance. When they first were traveling in the area, they saw women hemorrhaging from childbirth being carted to clinics in wheelbarrows. I mean, this should not be. So Riders for Health is making an extraordinary difference in the countries where it's working. But the reason I wanted to talk to you a little bit is to just tell you how we've worked with them as a foundation. So we've made grant investments in them where they can deploy the dollars where they think best. We've also made a PRI, a program-related investment. We've secured essentially a loan with a deposit in the bank in the Gambia so that they can evolve their model to a leasing program. They basically lease the fleet of motorcycles and manage the maintenance for the Gambian Ministry of Health. We've also worked with them to get their story into the media. They were featured in a series we did for the BBC, Alvin's Guide to Good Business. And when they screened that episode for the Minister of Health in the Zambia, they were able to ink a memorandum of understanding within 3 days, where the normal process, 3 years. So incredible leverage from media. And then also the Said Business School did an executive MBA program for their staff, which is distributed in these 7 countries. So a lot of value we can bring to them as a foundation well beyond the grant support we provide. And now I'm going to tell you about an organization that we just brought into the portfolio last year. I'm going to show you a very short video so you can see for yourself the remarkable work that Basic Needs does. It's 2 minutes.
About 70% of data is living in the rural areas, and conditions there are certainly quite harsh. You have schizophrenia, depression, bipolar disorders, anxiety disorders. For a whole country of 25 million people, we have about 14 psychiatrists, and that translates to about 1 psychiatrist per 2 million people.
Many, many people never get diagnosed and never get treated.
Basic Needs is changing that by establishing a new community-based model of mental health care.
Basic Needs provide a system where there hasn't been a system before.
The system focuses on economic and social well-being, as well as medical health. It begins by training primary care doctors, nurses, and community volunteers to diagnose and treat mental illness in areas where there are no psychiatrists.
We're shifting the task that would otherwise be with a specialist onto people who are non-specialized, but who nevertheless have authority.
One such nurse, Subsa Tawale, played a key role in the treatment of school teacher Francis Kubila. Before they met, Kubila's violent behavior had led the village's traditional healer to lock him up.
His family particularly thought that he was a danger to himself and to the community, especially his wife and children.
He'd been locked down in his own home. Now, when I say locked down, I mean his leg had been pinioned in a large log.
Then they use some nails to lock it so that the leg cannot come out.
Kubila's family left him attached to the log for 2 years.
And this is very typical of what happens to people where mental illness is ill understood.
Once the nurse diagnosed Kubila as suffering from psychosis, he gave him medicine that improved his condition quickly. Basic Needs then helped him, as it does thousands of others, find a new job.
Finding a job is crucial to not only your survival, but also to the reduction of stigma, which means that you get accepted back into society.
They've been helping to demystify mental health, and that has actually helped to remove some of the barriers and discrimination.
When I started the organization, we started with a blank sheet of paper. Now, there's well over 108,000 people who have been through our program. It's a drop in the ocean, but the ocean's very big.
So that's a pretty powerful example of how someone can identify a problem and go to work on it with resources that are at hand. How can communities heal themselves? Diagnosis, getting the treatment, reintegrating people into society, finding them jobs. It's a holistic approach. More than 580,000 people treated so far, and on its way to becoming a real standard for mental health treatment in the developing world. And I think actually we're seeing much more south-north messaging going on happily. A lot we can learn in the developed world from approaches, humane, thoughtful approaches like Chris Underhill's. Really a remarkable, remarkable social entrepreneur. Okay, 3 lessons to close with. Lessons that we've learned from our social entrepreneurs over the years. I started by saying it's not how big you are, it's about how big a difference you can make. It's your scale of impact. It's not about dominating a space or being taking a market and being the biggest player. It's about how well you cross boundaries and build connections. None of us can do this work on our own. Even the greatest social entrepreneur isn't sui generis. They have to partner. They have to partner with the public sector. They have to partner often with the private sector. They partner with their communities. The social in social entrepreneurship is about unlocking the potential of societies. The greatest stakeholders for social entrepreneurs are people who are themselves oppressed. They are the secret sauce. Their ambition is the secret sauce of what makes social entrepreneurship work. People know that there's a better life, there's better possibility for them. Social entrepreneurs unlock that human potential. And finally, it's not about how powerful you are, but it's how you empower others. So this is the way power, this is the power paradigm of social entrepreneurship. It's empowerment. I started by telling you about giving up fairy tales as a 10-year-old, and this is my granddaughter here. I like to think that that she'll be reading biographies too. Unfortunately, she's 4 years old and she has been smitten by the princess bug. So she has every Disney princess in the planet. I, had no idea there were so many, and she has, plastic ponies too. But anyway, she will see the day, and she will probably be younger than I was when she actually realizes that the real things that matter in the world are real people making a real difference. And just to close with some words from Jeff's inspiration and mine, John Gardner, I love this way he frames problems. What we have before us are some breathtaking opportunities disguised as insoluble problems. That's the way social entrepreneurs see the world. And their gift to us is bringing us on board as their partners in creating that world we all see beckoning, we all know is within reach. And now let's have some fun. Let's ask some questions and engage in some conversation. Yes, back there.
Thank you for the talk. It's very inspiring. I was wondering if you can comment on how you measure impact in every social enterprise that you support. You talked a little bit about it with the writers, but I can imagine that it's very different in every organization, and it's also referred to as an elusive problem when you try to calculate this impact. So I was just wondering how you do that.
Well, we have been working on this like everybody, and there's no silver bullet. So we start with the scale of the problem that the social entrepreneur is trying to address and really getting our arms around that. For example, in the Amazon, we know what the rate of deforestation is. We know that deforestation is a critical factor in climate change, responsible for something like 20% of global greenhouse gas emissions. And it's a double whammy because if you don't have the sequestration of carbon, you unleash even more, even a larger problem. So we get our arms around the scale of the problem and the region in which the social entrepreneur is working. And then we look for their impact thesis. What is it that they are doing? How are they thinking about impact? Are they trying to solve the problem, or are they just trying to ameliorate suffering? You know, and that's a difference for us, not just ameliorating suffering, putting a Band-Aid on it, but trying to solve the problem. And then we look for the milestones. Do they have a system for measuring their impact along the way? Are they looking at market feedback? How rigorous are they in actually taking in what the market is telling them and evolving their model? What are their milestones? And then we look at what we can do to help them power up their impact. Now, none of them are going to crack the code on climate change or global poverty or public education tomorrow. But is there a difference that they're making that is measurable, and do they have a system for measuring it? And then what is the value that we add as the foundation? So every year I roll up the evidence of what's working and where we're seeing progress as a way of keeping us honest. But there is no, there is no single metric, there is no silver bullet. The social entrepreneur and their feedback mechanism, and then how the foundation engages with them, and the evidence that they are actually, that what we're doing is helping them make more of a difference and make it faster. Yes?
I'm intrigued by your description how you invest in the people, and great social entrepreneurship comes from people rather than specific projects that you invest in. So how does that translate into kind of practical, when you allocate your resources or funds? Do you look at the entrepreneurs first and foremost and then go on to the projects that they have delivered in the past? Or?
Yeah, you use the word project, and the other word that's out there is program. And so we're not investing in projects, and we're not investing in programs. We're investing in social entrepreneurs and their organizations. And the buzzword is capacity, but we don't use that word because, you can invest in capacity till you're blue in the face. We're investing in impact, and we're investing in social entrepreneurs and organizations that are driving impact. So we're really not interested in the project so much as we are in the holistic vision of how that organization will achieve impact over time. And that's a real differentiator. And our original Skoll Award goes to the organization. The individual is the recipient, is really the face of the organization, often the founder, not always the founder, but often the founder of the innovation. Someone who has her or his hand at the helm of that ship and is really steering the course to drive serious impact in the world. That's our mantra. But the world is full of foundations that actually provide 1 or 2 year at the most grants that are funding projects, that are funding programs, and are, not really making much of a difference at the end of the day. So we have staying power. Our initial Skoll Award is a 3-year funding. It's now $1.25 million that goes with the award. We mean it when we say we connect and celebrate. We're connecting social entrepreneurs with other social entrepreneurs and with the broader world of people involved in change making. And we are bringing media resources and all other kinds of resources to them to fuel that impact. And that's what we do. So we are kind of a hybrid. We are a grant-making organization, but we're also an operating foundation. We have our own programs. So but all those programs are focused on scaling the social entrepreneur's impact. Yes?
Can you describe a little bit about the evolving nature of the funding landscape within Impact and how that's influenced what you're doing at Skoll, particularly if you could touch on the rise of many impact investors who are looking for both a return on capital as well as a return on kind of social impact, and how maybe divergent incentives are influencing you or changing what you're trying to do at Skoll?
Well, impact investing is sort of the new buzz phrase, and impact investing, frankly, has been going on a very, very long time. I think I mentioned Capricorn early on. The foundation does its own version of impact investing, both directly through program-related investments. We can do loan guarantees, we can do equity investments, we can do straight loans. So for an example, for an organization like Root Capital, We've provided grant support for them and also a program-related investment to be able to increase their loan portfolio. They're now at $500 million. But we're not interested in how large their loan portfolio is. We're interested in the difference they're making with the small producers whom they're serving, and whether in fact they are cultivating that market for commercial capital to flow in and to secure supply chains and secure livelihoods. That's the double bottom line we're after there. Whether impact investing can be proven to be a fruitful branch of social entrepreneurship remains to be seen. I happen to believe that where there is market-based opportunity, market-based funding will flow. So I think it's something of a red herring to say that this is, this is the next shiny new thing. We're invested in, through Capricorn, we're invested in all the obvious things. We're invested in D-Light, and we're invested in Embrace, and we're also invested in Tesla. And guess what? Tesla is making a lot of money. And you probably aren't thinking of Elon Musk as a social entrepreneur, but I happen to think Elon Musk is a great social entrepreneur. And with Dragon 2 and SpaceX, that's also Elon Musk. So, where there is market opportunity, market funding will flow. And then there's this other space with the D-Lights and so on, or proximity design is in our portfolio. In our portfolio too, you all know about the Design for Extreme Affordability class here at Stanford, and some really interesting ideas have come out of that. And believe me, there are investors circling to see what actually has market potential. People talk about a bubble in impact investing. I don't know if that's real, but I know there's a lot of capital sitting on the sidelines waiting for the opportunities where returns can be made and social and environmental benefits actually derived as well. I think there's plenty of evidence in social entrepreneurship that that's been going on for a very long time. So there's really nothing new under the sun. I think what's new is sort of the attention that's focused on this, and we'll see. It's all about, at the end of the day, I think it's all about the impact and, proving that the value can be delivered. There's also there's a bit of a tension, I think, between the folks who argue that you have to take substandard market returns in exchange for social returns, and I think that's also not at all proven. Where there is money to be made, money will flow. And like most ventures, some of them will succeed and some of them won't, but not just because they had a 30x projection.
You talked a little bit about scaling impact as opposed to scaling organizations. I'm just curious, what are some of the barriers that you've seen to scaling impact out of all the companies or organizations, entrepreneurs that have come through school that you've both seen and or have not funded? And what are some things that even like starting entrepreneurs should think about in terms of scalability?
Well, I think that the greatest thing, and this was a real aha for us, was this idea that there's an ecosystem of actors. And unless you as a social entrepreneur are really partnering effectively in that ecosystem, you're never going to get to impact at scale. So if I think of an organization like Partners in Health, most of you know of Partners in Health, Paul Farmer's organization. One of the things Paul is very, very clear about, and many social entrepreneurs are, Ann Cotton is another one, that public institutions are absolutely critical. They are the arbiter of rights, and at the end of the day, they will guarantee the rights of citizens. And so for a social entrepreneur like an Ann Cotton working on girls' education in Africa, or Paul Farmer working on the right to health care and good health, you have to invest in those public institutions. So I see that's a mindset, and that's also evidence. So looking at the strategic partnerships that social entrepreneurs engage with, and I'm not talking superficial here. I'm not talking about marriages of convenience or a laundry list of all the organizations you work with or partner with. I'm talking about serious strategic partnerships where there is genuine learning and reciprocity. There was a great piece in The Economist several weeks ago that I could have written 2 years ago, and it was a case study of this organization, Amazon, and how Amazon worked with the Brazilian government. Amazon's an NGO based in Brazil, pioneered the use of satellite technology to monitor real-time deforestation in the Amazon basin. But they partnered with media, they partnered with the government, they got organizations and municipalities onto blacklists. They got them so that they wanted to get off the blacklist. They got the government to realign the incentives. And lo and behold, deforestation started to change in the Amazon. Amazon was a player, but Marina Silva in the environmental ministry was also critical. Lula's policies were critical. The media was critical. And finally, you get the municipalities signed on and corporations who are adopting more sustainable ranching and farming practices in order to preserve the ecological ecosystem while continuing to profit. So all of that partnership is what really makes the difference, I think, between, I guess we have electrical monitoring here. But that's what makes the difference, I think, between really effective social entrepreneurs pursuing impact and not just trying to be the biggest, most powerful NGO in the world. We have plenty of those to go around. Yes?
So I'm working in this space right now, and I just had a couple questions around the grant money, PRI concept. So we secured a lot of grant money for sort of our seed round, but as we look towards Series A, I'm just wondering, where do we go? When does PRI become an option for us, and how do we approach that? I mean, I know how to approach VCs and angels. I don't know how to approach PRI to sort of go for our next round.
Well, again, what's the opportunity? Is it an equity investment? Is it for example, Embrace. Do you all know Embrace? Most of you know Embrace. Embrace came out of the Design for Extreme Affordability class here. It's a very a low-cost incubator, $200. It's like a little sleeping bag, has wax in it that can be heated. So a baby in the developing world who is born prematurely has a much better chance of surviving. So you can heat this wax and get the baby to hospital. And incubators in the developing world, the $200,000 kind not only is in short supply, but you don't have the reliable electricity either. So this is a real lifesaver. So Embrace started as a for-profit company. It was able to raise some money, but it's also created, now it's gone the other route and created a nonprofit as well, because it recognizes that their grant support can actually get this social enterprise secured. But they actually had to have a business plan that made sense. They had to have customers lined up, and they could actually secure the capital they needed in their first rounds to get the product to market. So what do you have? Is it a loan portfolio? Do you have a case for equity? Do you have a case for, do you need a guarantee in a bank? What is it that would work for you? I can't answer that question, but you have to have the business case, because a PRI, a program-related investment, is really a hybrid. It's a social purpose investment, but its first purpose for it to qualify with the IRS has to be social benefit. And then it has to function as a market-based investment with return of capital or some other conditions. So you can answer that question better than I for what your case is.
One, we got grant money as a for-profit too, and so I'm wondering if you're seeing more of that.
You got grant money as a for-profit?
We did, yeah.
And you don't have a nonprofit?
We don't, no subsidiary.
Well, then whoever gave you the money doesn't get a tax write-off. I mean, that's the rule. That's the IRS rule. So someone can give you money and just assume it's going for a good purpose. That's fine. There's no rule against that, but they're not going to be able to deduct it.
There was actually legalities that required them to give nonprofits, because I think they were able to it's from the MacArthur Foundation. So.
Oh, well then it was a PRI.
But it wasn't PRI, so they didn't do it through their PRI portfolio. So it's pretty unique, I mean, in that space. but I'm not sure how I approach, like, do I go back to the same people and say, hey, I want to talk PRI now?
They gave you a grant
It did, I know, it's crazy.
to a for-profit?
It did, yeah.
They must have some, there's something in the IRS has that's called a special letter ruling, so maybe they got a special ruling to be able to do it, but they, you know, by law, they have to, when they file their 990, they have to, you know, they have to list it, so. This is, you know, it's designed to prevent people from, you know, people who sit on boards and people who put their money in foundations, it's to prevent them for trying to feather their own nests. So that's why those laws exist, you know, so that people don't use charitably purposed funding for commercial purposes.
I think grants, so where there will be no reward on it, so. But as far as approaching PRI, sorry to belabor the question here, but when you go to a foundation like the school foundation, do you just let them know, hey, I'm looking for PRI dollars now? I want to talk to those folks?
Sure.
I assume they're different.
Yeah, you can, but our bias is, you know, social entrepreneurs in our portfolio, at what point do they have a case for a PRI?
And then when
No, we don't do seed, we're mezzanine, so we don't do early stage. We need at minimum, a 3-year track record. That's that impact, you know, the 4 I's, the innovation, the inflection point, the issue, and the impact. Is there a record of impact? So you say you want to change this, that, or the other. What's the evidence? What's the data? What's the proof that your, you know, your thesis, your venture, your organization can deliver? So we don't do seed. We let other people do that. Then we actually thought there was a big gap in the market. There were an awful lot of early stage social entrepreneurs who never get the chance to really go the next stage. So we're all about moving up that next big S curve. Yes?
What degree does Skoll communicate with all the other funders? I mean, do you speak to the early stage funders to find out which organizations are successful and need to kind of move into the mezzanine and would benefit from Skoll?
Yes, we do. In our space, we do a lot. So we work with Draper Richards. We have worked with Ashoka. Ashoka, when we actually landed on this strategy, we did a market analysis because we felt we're an ecosystem player. We need to walk our talk. We don't need to do what others are doing. And at the time, Ashoka was doing early stage, and they weren't actually even funding in the US. They were doing early stage developing world. And so we said, okay, we'll fund, you know, up the food chain, the next stage, so that we can be a good ecosystem player. We can contribute something that no one else is contributing. Echoing Green, Ashoka, even Draper Richards, all early stage. So we said there's no one playing at this stage. This is where we'll play. So yes, we communicate with others. Yeah, we think that's essential. But do we communicate as well as we should with some of the larger foundations? No, we don't, because basically they don't, you know, they're still very much into programmatic funding. And they do a lot of, you know, project-based funding. Not all of them, but many of them do. Yes?
So through this class, we've heard from a lot of organizations who've been really successful. But since you've interacted with numerous organizations, what do you think is the biggest reason these fail? Like, many of them fail if they don't become successful?
Oh, you know, I believe that discipline and drive are just as important as other attributes. So when social entrepreneurs drift and they don't practice the discipline of their strategy, they don't keep their eye on the ball, they're bending and drifting according to the whims of funders and others, I think that can be a deadly circumstance. So I think that kind of the focus and the discipline is actually a real hallmark of entrepreneurs. They are the most focused people in the world, in my experience. And when they don't, it shows. So I think discipline is just as important as creativity and innovation and the rest of the things you associate with entrepreneurship. Yes.
In traditional entrepreneurship, people talk a lot about failure, and when traditional entrepreneurs talk, often what they start out with is the ways that they failed early on and what they learned from that. When social entrepreneurs talk, they almost never start with, here are all the ways that I messed up and didn't work. How do you think about failure in the context of social entrepreneurship?
Well, first of all, when we're talking with entrepreneurs, remember we're mezzanine, so they've got most of them have anywhere from 5 to 20 years. And so they are going to, I talk about integrity. I want them to talk about their failures. I want them to talk about what they've learned along the way, because if they haven't absorbed a lot of the lessons from their markets, then they're not really going to be good entrepreneurs. That doesn't mean that they're going to try things and always be successful from then on. They'll try things and they won't be successful. Paul Rice is in our portfolio right now. He brought fair trade to the U.S. Fair trade had been pretty much a phenomenon, a European phenomenon. He imported it to the U.S. And sometimes that happens. Entrepreneurs sort of they repurpose something from one context to another. But he's now trying to pioneer this fair trade for all and go beyond the smallholder to the plantations, to the big plantations. Very, very, very controversial. Very controversial in the whole fair trade space. He may not succeed. He may fail. But he believes he's on the right path. He's dead set on going this route. It's a new strategic angle for him, and he may fall flat on his face. So it's okay to fail, but it's not okay to play fast and loose when lives and livelihoods are at stake. And that, I think, is really true of social entrepreneurship. I mean, it's not just disappointing your investors. It's risking people's lives. So I think it's important to have that discipline about what you're doing and to really be in tune with what your market is telling you. Yeah. Oh, we just use all kinds of metrics. So what are some examples? So back to Paul Farmer. One of the stories I think of efficacy for Partners in Health was the way it went after proving that you could administer complex drug protocols in very poor environments. The WHO refused to okay tuberculosis medications for the shanty towns in Lima when a bad TB outbreak occurred there, and he went about getting the resources to prove that in fact you could achieve superior results to those in the developed world with a 98% cure and efficacy rate. So that's evidence that something works. Same thing with cholera. When the cholera epidemic broke out in Haiti, again, Partners in Health was vaccinating. Did you even know a cholera vaccination existed? I didn't even know. But again, they had to secure the vaccination, and they have data on what the tipping point is to be able to stop the epidemic. So their data on their interventions and the difference they're making is what we look to be confident that in fact they are on a path to achieving impact. So a sine qua non for us is whether they're evidence-based, whether they are mining the data for their own efficacy. And then for us, we're looking at things like for the Skoll World Forum, we have a whole protocol that we survey participants on around the value that they derive, whether they made contacts, whether they've raised money, whether they've learned something new. So really trying to hold ourselves accountable for delivering a valuable experience rather than a, show and tell. So different methodologies for different programs and purposes. Yeah?
Question. how and where do you see the future of entrepreneurship? Where does social entrepreneurship? Like we've had speakers come and say that it's just a fad that'll just fade away and not be anything. We've got others who say that it's the future of entrepreneurship in general, that entrepreneurship will become social entrepreneurship at some point in the future. Where do you stand on the sort of on what you see where it leads on to?
Well, I think I'm of that second school. So I look at all of you and your interest in social entrepreneurship. So why do you think you're interested in social entrepreneurship? Why are you interested in social entrepreneurship? I'll put it back on you. My theory is that you're interested in social entrepreneurship because you realize that the world is not headed in the direction that you believe it should be. You see environmental degradation, you see climate change, you see new weapons and diseases, you see uprisings that aren't being resolved. You see people without hope, and you think, no, there's a better way. There's a better way, and so I think that's the only way the world changes. Jean Monnet, who was one of the architects of the European Union, said nothing changes without individuals, but nothing lasts without institutions. And I think social entrepreneurs are key to building the new institutions in revitalizing the existing institutions that will really be the basis for the world. You have all over the world, you have new technologies in the hands of ordinary citizens that are actually leading to governments understanding that they are accountable to their citizens. And as those citizens acquire livelihoods, as they pay taxes, they will demand more from their governments. And that is actually, that's a path for the world to change. So I look and I see the talent and the interest and the commitment of young people as a powerful, powerful, powerful force for good in the world. So I'm a believer that entrepreneurship will ultimately all be social entrepreneurship because people are motivated to solve problems. And that's the lifeblood of the social entrepreneur.
So as a follow-up to that question, a lot of people we spoke on the field told us that we're at a tipping point. Do you agree with this? And if you do, when will we understand that we passed that tipping point? What will be the pointers of that?
I wouldn't make a prediction like that. I would actually, what I'd want to do is just be much more mindful of where there is an emergent model or an emergent innovation that actually deserves to be scaled up in a very, very significant way. I mean, I talked a little bit about Amazon and satellite monitoring. I mean, when you look at that, the power of that technology to really play back for us everything from, glacier melt to deforestation to the temperature of the oceans. I mean, there is so much information now that can feed attempts to do something to change the trajectory of the planet that, I think it's breathtaking, but you need social entrepreneurs to harness the potential of that for positive change. And the other thing that keeps me up at night is I think governments are slow. I mean, democratic processes are laborious. They don't move as quickly as we need to move. So we need entrepreneurs and we need social entrepreneurs to pave the way and cultivate the ground for governments to do what they need to do. So innovation, I think, in the climate space, innovation in the, even innovation in the, in the diplomatic space are essential because the old systems are showing their wear, and we've got to have entrepreneurs incentivizing them to change and to change more quickly. Melanie?
Sure. I'm curious where you see the Skoll Foundation. What's next? And where do you see on the social entrepreneur side the biggest challenges for the entrepreneurs?
Oh, that's two good questions. Well, we started pioneering a couple of years ago. We started pioneering something we're calling innovation investments. And these are time-bound opportunities to scale up something that is really, really working well. So, for example, we put an innovation investment in Amazon and their Green Municipalities initiative in the state of Pará. The state of Pará is one of the largest states in the Amazon. It was the worst offender in deforestation. 134 municipalities have now signed on, and they're on their way to becoming sort of the gold standard of sustainable logging, sustainable ranching, proving that you can actually achieve your economic goals as well as your environmental and social goals. So that's a good example of an innovation investment, and innovation investing is sort of a new, it's a new direction for the foundation. But all of that is about driving impact and scaling up impact and proving what's working. We also were part of a major new initiative called the Social Progress Imperative, which published its first index last April. This is a project that really assesses the social progress of countries around the world. 3 basic categories, 57 indicators. So, for example, an area like sanitation can be measured by piped water, so access to piped water. So what you can measure, you can actually shine a light on and get done. So that was another major initiative for us. And then you asked about social entrepreneurs.
If there's in common, you can say the biggest challenges they're facing to have more impact.
Yeah, I think the biggest, someone said to me a long time ago, and I actually believe this, that the only limitations he acknowledged were the limitations of his own talents and abilities. And I think social entrepreneurs, they're starved for capital, many of them. And so I'd be the first to admit that they're starved for capital. And so our Connect and Celebrate is really about shining a light on what's working so that resources can flow to what really deserve to be scaled up in a big way. So I think that's the perennial problem, and it's a real problem. So if you're going to work in 15 countries, it's going to take more. It's going to take more than working in 5 countries. Context matters. I think that's the other issue, that what works in India may not work in Peru. So some of that contextual adaptation, building in the time to experiment and learn as you're scaling, I think is also critical. And all of that's fueled by a combination of humility and the real commitment to learning from your stakeholders, and confidence and perseverance that you will stay with this until you crack the code. So the challenge of scaling impact is always there for the best social entrepreneurs. They're restless. They're restless creatures.
Last question, if there is any.
Yes.
What advice do you have for us on how to get involved in social entrepreneurship and get exposed to it and make an impact to college students?
Well, I think you should continue to work with Barish on what you want to get out of this course. I was really happy to see, was it you, Melanie, or was one of you who said you were going to actually go into the field and see and talk with some folks, because it's one thing to be in what I call in the hot house, reading about it, studying it, learning about it, and it's another thing to see it, to participate in it, to recognize what challenging work social entrepreneurship really is. So the more each of you can find a way to engage and intern yourselves to be able to learn from someone on the front lines, that's the most important thing, because the hothouse will only get you so far. Okay.
Thank you very much, Sally.
Oh, you're welcome, Doris. Thank you. you.